So in this video, I'll be providing you with some real examples about rental arbitrage on the Gold Coast, but I'm also going to talk about what nobody talks about, which is regulation on the Gold Coast. Now let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is that most people are actually running this business illegally. And that's not because they don't have written permission from the landlords to sublease the properties, but because the properties that they're subleasing don't have a permission from council to be run as Airbnbs. So hopefully this video will help you avoid making the mistake of building a house of cards as your next business venture. Now the Gold Coast has quite specific regulation when it comes to short-term rentals and Airbnbs, and they're actually quite strict. So as we can see, this is a map from council. The bright pink area is the area that's generally allowed for properties to be run as Airbnbs. And as we can see, it's not really an extended area. So we have Surfers Paradise, Broad Beach, a tiny piece of Southport. But this area shown in here doesn't mean that every single property in that area will be allowed. Some buildings have different rules, and certain streets that are in close proximity to these areas might have limitations. And here's an example. This person spent over $20,000 to try and get council approval. This is an owner, and he got rejected with no refund. So his property was in Chevron Island, pretty much in Surfers Paradise. So you just gotta make sure you pick the right property when it comes to this business. And on the Gold Coast, there are various zonings. We have medium, low density zonings, and depending on that, the assessment level changes. And with the assessment level, the cost also changes. Now, I'm just sharing this from my personal experience as a property owner. I own 2 on the Gold Coast and 3 in Brisbane. I am not a town planner, and the right person to talk to when it comes to regulation is definitely a town planner. Now, as a property owner, I'm not really in favor of such strict regulations. I believe that people should be doing whatever they want with their own property. And regulations like these in the long term are just gonna make things worse off. The economy overall will be worse off. As we can see from the New York's experiment with the ban on Airbnbs, nothing has changed. Actually, rents have gone up. Same with Byron Bay with the super strict daily restriction. So we have so much data that shows us that limiting short-term rentals is counterproductive for the economy, and it doesn't really free up properties available on the market for long term. Now, the Brisbane City Council's own report showed that only 1% of properties listed on Airbnb account for the available listings on the market. And this is just to give you a broad idea. Now, this is quite important to understand because there are a lot of implications when you get an owner to agree to those terms, because a lot of owners are not actually aware of these rules. And if you want to build a sustainable business, you don't want to get yourself into a bad reputation either. So you don't want the owner to actually get a show of cause notice from council telling him that he's either got to get a fine or he's got to apply for these expensive permits. And we also have to account that council rates in a lot of areas will become higher when a property is approved to be run as an Airbnb. Now let's dive straight into 2 very specific examples, and let's crunch the numbers together to see if this business model is worth it or not. Now, for simplicity, I just included Broad Beach and Surfers Paradise in here. My filters were 1 plus pets, and then I have rent up to $900 per week. Now, I sorted properties from lowest to highest so that we can have a look at the cheapest properties before we move on to the most expensive ones. So as we can see, the first option that we have in here is not really a decent option for Airbnb. The building is very old and it looks quite residential. It doesn't look like a resort style or hotel with amenities, so this is not something that will perform well on Airbnb. So all we gotta do is to find things that generally perform well on Airbnb, and we're gonna use a software called AirDNA. I'm just gonna show you in a second. Now, same thing with these types of units. They don't tend to perform really well on Airbnb. They're quite dated and often in strictly residential buildings, and they need a lot of renovation as well. Now let's have a look at this one. This is a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 parking space. It's got an ocean view, which is good to attract guests. It's got a pool, it's got some amenities. So our weekly rent is $600 a week. It's an unfurnished property, and the bond is $2,400 a week. Now, if we look at the images, this has been partly renovated. Okay, there's some fake cladding on the walls. The kitchen looks just okay. It could do with a reno. The carpet looks just okay. But let's use this as a starting base, because this is one of the cheapest properties that could potentially work. So all we gotta do is to take this address and type it into AirDNA. Once we type into the AirDNA, it's gonna project our yearly revenue here. So the yearly revenue is around $49,000 per year, an occupancy of 67%, and a daily average rate of $200 per night. Now, the figure that we have in here, we have to take with a grain of salt because we need to do more comprehensive analysis. The analysis that we gotta do has to be both quantitative and qualitative. What do I mean by that? We need to look at, if you can see here, there is a map. So we'll need to look at this map, see what similar listings are making per year, so that we have a better understanding of how this property is actually going to perform. Now, as you can see, we have properties filtered based on revenue here, so we can have a look at all the existing listings in here. For example, the top property here is actually a 2-bedroom, so it's not even comparable in here. It might have been a system error in here. Again, the top performing properties are making around the 70K mark. And then what we gotta do is to figure out what characteristics do these top performing properties have, and can we replicate them in our listing? Yes or no, how much it's gonna cost? And then we have to have a look at the lowest performing properties at the bottom and see what characteristics we need to avoid in order to not be a low performer in the market. So let's crunch the numbers for this specific property. Now with this example, we take $49,000, which is our expected revenue. We multiply by 0.78. The reason why we multiply by 0.78 because we're taking into consideration of a 20 to 22% cleaning fee of gross revenue. So to be conservative, I took 22% in here. Then we're gonna minus it by the yearly rent, minus utility bills, plus internet. And this is just an estimate based on, what I've been paying in my own apartments. And then we have the cost of softwares and keys for the year, minus maintenance, if anything goes wrong for the year, minus the furniture, around 8 grand for this specific small unit, or even less if you're frugal. And then we have a $2,400 deposit, as we saw from the ad. Now, the first year loss in this case is going to be $13,000, okay? You'll be negative by this much because you're investing in furniture. The second year, you won't have the furniture or deposit expense, so you'll end up with a $2,640 loss. So not every single month is going to be a loss. Some months will be positive, but overall, this looks like a deal that I would definitely pass. Not something that is feasible, and we also need to do a lot more due diligence on the possibility of running this as an Airbnb based on the building. But because it's already a resort, this seemed to be highly likely for the type of building. Now let's move on to the 2-bedroom apartment market, see if the numbers make more sense. With the 2-bedroom apartment market, I did the same exact thing, up to $1,100 per week, and then sorted by price, so lowest first. Again, similar things, we have properties that I deem unsuitable due to their age, due to their location as well. So this property here seemed to be quite okay, still at the bottom end of the market, but it does have, nice views, ocean views. It is quite okay. It is quite decent when it comes to, looking fresh and decently renovated. It doesn't look too old. So we're gonna have a look at this property in particular. Now this property is like a 2-bedroom apartment and it comes at $680 a week. Bond is $2,720. So what we're gonna do the same exact thing. We're gonna use this address. We're gonna use AirDNA to give us an estimate. And the estimate in here is very high. We have 94.6K per year. But again, these kind of numbers can be skewed. So we have to be very careful and take these with a grain of salt, because the building that we picked is quite old and we have some incredible buildings in here. As you can see, we have the Jewel with a revenue potential of 172K. But again, these are high lux properties, okay? So what we gotta do is to spend like an hour at least to analyze all the properties nearby, how much they're making, if there are any in the same exact building, and based on that, we can get an estimate on the feasibility of this deal. We gotta do the same thing. We gotta pick the top performers in the area, figure out what makes them stand out. Is it because it's a modern building? Is it because of the facilities? Is it because of how it's styled and furnished? So we have to gather data that point us into a direction that is going to increase our likelihood of making more money. Then we got to do the same exact thing with the bottom performers. We have to identify the characteristics that make a property earn little money. Like, is it photos? Is it description? Is it the age of the building? Is it how it's presented? And so on. Now let's crunch the numbers now with this specific property. Now, as you can see, we're just gonna take this estimate for simplicity, 94K minus cleaning, Then we have our rental expenditure. Utility bills are pretty much the same between 1 2-bedroom apartments. They might be slightly higher, but I've been quite generous on the safe side before. Then we have softwares, they're gonna cost the exact same. Maintenance is gonna be pretty much the same. Furniture is gonna be a bit more expensive, 10 grand minus the initial deposit. Now, as we can see, if we can achieve this number in here, we're gonna be positive by $15,500 from the first year. So this seemed to be quite a good deal. And then from the second year onwards, we'll be netting around $28,000 in here because we don't have any furniture or deposit cost. So what we learned from these examples is that 2-bedroom apartments tend to be a lot more profitable than 1-bedroom apartments when it comes to rental arbitrage deals, but also when it comes to purchasing an apartment. They earn almost double, but rent is not double. So your margins are much higher. So this is something to consider when you're picking your property. I hope you found this video useful, and if you want to work with me one-on-one, click the link below to schedule a call. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, please subscribe and ensure you follow me on Instagram as well. I'll see you in the next one.